The sleek diplomatic vessel carrying Ambassador Park and his team drifted into the vast chamber where the Galactic Concord held its meetings. The room hummed with the quiet chatter of 27 alien species, some resembling insects with shimmering carapaces, others like floating clouds of colored gas contained in environmental suits. Humans were the newcomers here, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 15 years ago. Park straightened his formal jacket and took a deep breath. At 43, he had spent half his life preparing for this moment, humanity's formal. Petition to join the interstellar community as equals, rather than probationary members. The Council recognizes the human delegation, announced the moderator, a tall being with pale blue skin and 6 slender fingers on each hand. Park stepped forward, his footsteps echoing in the suddenly silent chamber. Honorable members of the Concord, we come seeking full membership among the stars. Earth has met all technological and environmental requirements. Our colonies on Mars and Europa thrive, and our deep space outposts maintain peace in our solar system. A rumble of discussion spread through the alien representatives. Most seemed indifferent, some curious, but the delegation from the Dorvan sector, reptilian beings with ridge-lined faces, watched with unmistakable hostility. Admiral Zhou, the Dorvan military leader, rose from his seat. His scales shifted from green to a dark amber as he spoke. These humans expand too quickly. They're unpredictable, emotional. Look how they transformed their own planet in just 2 centuries, from primitive combustion engines to quantum drives. Such rapid advancement is concerning. Several council members nodded in agreement. The Dorvan recommendation is simple, Zhou continued, his voice growing harder. Test them. All species face challenges before acceptance. The moderator tilted, his head. What test do you propose, Admiral? Zhou's mouth curved into what might have been a smile on a human face, but on his, it looked predatory. The void of Thanatos. A collective gasp filled the chamber. Even species without lungs found ways to express shock. That's not a test, it's a death sentence, whispered Min, Park's junior diplomat. Park kept his face carefully neutral, though his heart raced. Everyone knew about the void, a region of space where thousands of ships had vanished over centuries. No known species had successfully traversed it. The terms? Park asked, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil. Admiral Zhou seemed pleased by the question. Simple. Your species must successfully navigate the void within 1 standard solar cycle. If you succeed, full membership. If you fail or refuse to attempt the crossing, he paused dramatically, humans must relinquish all claims to territory beyond your home system for the next 100 years. You can't be serious, said Council Member Jin, one of the few aliens who regularly supported human interests. No species has ever completed this challenge. Precisely, Zhou replied. If humans are truly ready for membership, let them prove their worthiness. The moderator turned to Park. Ambassador, you may request time to consult with your government. Park looked around the chamber, noting the mix of concern, curiosity, and in some cases, barely concealed anticipation of human failure. He thought about Earth, about the generations who had dreamed of reaching the stars, about the sacrifices made to get humanity this far. No consultation needed, Park said firmly. We accept the challenge. His words created another wave of murmurs throughout the chamber. Admiral Zhou's scales darkened with surprise. He had clearly expected the humans to request time, perhaps even withdraw their petition entirely. You understand what you're agreeing to? The moderator asked. The Void has claimed countless vessels, some of the Concord's finest ships and crews. Park nodded. We understand. Humanity has faced impossible odds before. It's actually something. Serve a specialty of ours. The corner of his mouth turned up slightly as he added, We'll see you on the other side, Admiral. Later, as the human delegation returned to their ship, Min approached Park with worried eyes. Sir, with all respect, do you know what you've done? The Void isn't just dangerous, it's considered unbeatable. Park looked out the viewport at the glittering expanse of stars. I know exactly what I've done, Min. I've given humanity what it needs most, a challenge that brings out our true nature. He turned to his team. Contact Earth. Tell them we need our best ship and crew. Someone who understands that impossible is just another problem waiting to be solved." As the message was sent across the vast distance to Earth, Admiral Zhou watched the human ship from his private chamber. His aide entered with a report. "The humans have accepted," the aide said, sounding confused. "They didn't even hesitate." Zhou stared out at the stars. "Interesting. Perhaps they don't fully comprehend the danger. Or perhaps," his aide suggested, "they know something we don't." Zhou dismissed the thought with a wave of his clawed hand. "No matter. In one cycle, the human problem will be contained. No species survives the void. It is the universe's way of teaching humility to the ambitious." Little did he know that humans had never been very good students when it came to learning their limitations. The message from Ambassador Park reached Earth Space Command headquarters within hours. Emergency meetings were called, experts consulted, and heated debates erupted across every level of government. Some officials wanted to reject the challenge outright, arguing that risking humanity's future on what amounted to a cosmic obstacle course was foolish. Others saw it as the opportunity they needed to prove themselves among the stars. In the end, the decision came down to one simple fact: humans had never been good at walking away from a challenge. Captain Lee stood at the window of the orbital station, watching Earth rotate slowly beneath her. At 36, she had already commanded 3 deep space missions, including the harrowing rescue of the Titan mining colony during the methane storms. Her dark hair was pulled back in her usual tight bun, and the faint scar across her left cheek, a souvenir from her first command, seemed to stand out more today. "Captain," a voice called from behind her, "they're ready for you in the briefing room." She nodded to the young lieutenant and took one last look at the blue planet below. It might be the last time she saw it. The briefing room was packed with military personnel and scientists when she arrived. Admiral Zhou, her mentor, and the head of the exploratory force nodded to her as she took her seat. "We've selected you to lead this mission, Captain," he said without preamble. "The Endurance is being prepped as we speak. You'll have our newest engines, best shields, and most advanced sensors." Lee looked at the holographic display showing the ship, sleek, powerful, and completely untested in the kind of conditions they'd face. "And my crew?" she asked. The Admiral tapped his tablet, and 4 profiles appeared in the air before them. "The best we have," he said. "Dr. Kim, our leading physicist on spatial mechanics. He's been working on theories about anomalous space for years, claims the textbooks are all wrong." The image showed a man in his early 40s with tired eyes and a distracted expression. Lee had heard of him, brilliant but difficult. Choi Sun-mi, deep space navigator. She's gotten ships through asteroid fields and radiation storms that should have been certain death. The woman in the image had a confident smile and eyes that seemed to look right through you. Major Han, tactical and security. 15 years. In Special Forces before joining Space Command. If anyone can keep your ship safe from whatever's in that void, it's him. The Major's image showed a sturdy man with a serious expression and military short hair peppered with grey. And finally, Hyun Jin-ho, communications specialist. He doesn't just translate languages, he understands them. He's spent the last 5 years studying alien communication systems. The youngest of the group, Yoon, had a gentle face that seemed at odds with the dangerous mission they faced. "This is who I get to navigate the deadliest region of space ever." "Discovered?" Lee asked, studying each face carefully. "These 4 plus you," the Admiral confirmed. "A small crew means fewer lives at risk and longer life support duration if things go wrong." Lee nodded slowly. "When do I meet them?" "They're waiting for you on the observation deck. You leave in 3 days. 3 days to prepare for a mission no one had ever survived. It wasn't much time, but it would have to be enough. The crew was exactly as she expected. Kim buried in calculations, barely acknowledging her presence. Choi studying star charts with intense focus. Major Han inspecting equipment specifications. And Yoon trying his best to build a rapport with everyone despite the tension. "Captain on deck," Han announced when she entered, the only one to stand at attention. "At ease, Major," Lee said. "We don't have time for formalities. In 3 days we're heading into the void of Thanatos. None of the alien races have managed to cross it successfully, which means we have to be the first. Or we lose our rights." To expand beyond our solar system for a century, Yoon added, his voice quiet but clear. Lee nodded. Exactly. So tell me what you know. Dr. Kim finally looked up from his tablet. Not enough, he said bluntly. The Concorde has provided data from previous attempts, but it's incomplete. Ships report reality distortions, hallucinations, equipment failures, then nothing. No debris has ever been recovered. It's a trap, Han said, arms crossed. The reptiles set us up to fail. Maybe, Lee conceded. But we still have to try. Choi manipulated the star chart, zooming in on a dark region that seemed to swallow light itself. The void doesn't behave like normal space. It seems to shift. Coordinates that should be fixed aren't. It's like trying to navigate through a dream. Or a nightmare, Yoon murmured. As the days passed, they worked around the clock. The Endurance was loaded with supplies, backup systems, and experimental equipment Dr. Kim insisted they would need. Major Han drilled them on emergency protocols until they could perform them half asleep. Choi memorized every scrap of data on the void's boundaries and behavior patterns. On the night before launch, Lee found Dr. Kim alone in the ship's lab, studying ancient star charts. "Shouldn't you be resting, Doctor?" she asked. Kim didn't look. "First, I found something interesting in these old records. The void hasn't always been there. It appeared about 8,000 years ago, according to the oldest Concorde archives. What does that tell us? That it might not be a natural phenomenon." He finally met her eyes. "Captain, what if the void was created? What if it's not just a deadly region of space, but something with purpose?" Before she could respond, her communicator beeped. It was a message from Earth. Alien observers had arrived to witness their departure. "The Concorde is sending representatives to watch us." "Fail," she told Kim with a grim smile. "Including Admiral Zhou himself." Kim returned to his charts. "Then let's make sure we give them a good show." The next morning, as the crew boarded the Endurance, they caught sight of the alien vessel hovering nearby. It was massive and ornate, clearly designed for diplomatic functions rather than exploration. "They're going to watch from a safe distance," Han remarked bitterly. "Typical." Captain Lee looked at her small crew. 5 humans against an impossible challenge. "Let them watch," she said. "We're about to make history." As the Endurance's engines fired up, Council member Jin approached Admiral Zhou on the observation deck. "Of the alien vessel. These humans," Jin said quietly. "They don't seem afraid." Zhou's scales rippled with amusement. "That's because they don't truly understand what awaits them. No species has ever returned from the void. The humans will be no different." Jin wasn't so sure. Something about the determination in the humans' eyes made him wonder if perhaps the Concorde had finally met a species that wouldn't accept the impossible as an answer. The Endurance approached the edge of the void, its sleek hull gleaming against the backdrop of stars. Inside the bridge, Captain Lee sat in the command chair, her fingers drumming lightly on the armrest, the only outward sign of her tension. The rest of the crew were at their stations, faces illuminated by the blue glow of their consoles. "Final systems check," Lee ordered, her voice steady. "Engines at 95% efficiency," reported Choi from the navigation console. "All. Flight systems green. Shields at maximum," Major Han confirmed, his military training evident in his precise tone. "Weapons systems. Not that they'll help us much in there." Dr. Kim looked up from his array of specialized equipment. "Sensors. Calibrated to detect spatial anomalies. If anything shifts out there, we'll know about it." "Communications ready," Yoon added quietly, "though I doubt we'll be talking to anyone once we're inside." Captain Lee nodded, taking a deep breath. "Send the message to Earth and the Concorde. Observers. Tell them we're going in." On the viewing screen, the void loomed before them. Not just darkness, but an absence of everything. Stars seemed to bend around its edges, as if light itself was afraid to enter. "It doesn't look natural," Choi murmured, her hands hovering over the navigation controls. "That's because it's not," Dr. Kim said, studying his readings. "The boundary. Leia shows energy patterns that couldn't possibly form on their own." Lee leaned forward in her chair. "Time to test your theories, Doctor. Choi, take us in 1/4 thrust." The Endurance moved forward, crossing the invisible line between normal space and whatever waited within the void. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then everything changed at once. The ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared across every console. The viewing screen flickered and went black, then returned, showing only swirling darkness outside. "We've lost contact with Earth," Yun reported, his fingers flying over his console. "And the Concord observers, we're completely cut off. Spatial coordinates are fluctuating," Choi said, her usual confidence shaken. "I can't get a stable reading. It's like the laws of physics are different in here." Lee gripped her armrests tighter. Dr. Kim, the physicist, was already buried in his readings, his face lit by the glow of rapidly changing numbers. "Fascinating, the space-time continuum is folding in on itself. It's like we're in a pocket dimension with its own rules." "Save the scientific excitement for later," Han growled. "Can we navigate through this or not?" Before Kim could answer, the ship lurched again, more violently this time. The lights flickered and died, leaving only the emergency red glow. "Power fluctuation," Choi reported. "Engines are still online, but barely." "Stabilize our course," Lee ordered. "Use manual controls if you have to." Hours passed in tense silence as they pushed deeper into the void. The darkness outside seemed to press against the viewports, an almost living presence watching them. The ship's systems continued to behave erratically. Temperature controls failed in sections, gravity fluctuated unpredictably, and the chronometers couldn't agree on how much time had passed. Then the hallucinations began. Yun was the first to notice something wrong. He kept turning his head, as if hearing voices from empty corners of the bridge. "Is someone calling me?" he asked, confusion clouding his face. Lee looked at him sharply. "No one said anything, Yun." The communications specialist shook his head, trying to clear it. "I could have sworn I heard—" His voice trailed off as his eyes widened, staring at something no one else could see. Dr. Kim checked his readings. "Brain activity is spiking across the crew. Whatever this place is, it's affecting our neural patterns." Major Han suddenly stood, from his station, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. "They're coming, don't you see them?" His face was contorted with fear, an expression Lee had never seen on the stoic officer. "Han! Stand down!" Lee shouted, but he didn't seem to hear. "Her!" "We need to turn back," Han insisted, his voice rising. "Now, before it's too late." Choi's hands trembled on the controls. I'm seeing my sister. She died in the lunar disaster. She's standing right there." She pointed to empty space beside the navigation console. Lee felt a cold sweat break out across her skin. She could feel the hallucinations trying to take hold in her own mind, whispers, shadows moving at the corner of her vision. With tremendous effort, she forced them back. "Listen." "To me," she commanded, her voice cutting through the growing panic. "Whatever you're seeing, it's not real. Focus on your instruments, your training." Dr. Kim surprisingly seemed the least affected. "It's trying to communicate," he said, almost wonderingly. "These aren't random hallucinations. They're tailored. To each of us. The void is searching our minds, finding our fears." "Well, tell it to stop," Han snapped, still looking around wildly. The ship lurched again, harder this time. A console exploded in a shower of sparks, throwing Yun to the floor. "Hull breach in Section 4, Choi called out. "Automatic seals engaged. Reroute power to the shields," Lee ordered. "Dr. Kim, what's happening?" The physicist was hunched over his equipment, ignoring the chaos around him. "The energy patterns are changing. It's responding to our presence, becoming more aggressive." As if to confirm his words, a massive invisible force slammed into the Endurance, sending it spinning through the darkness. Emergency restraints deployed automatically, keeping the crew in their seats, but equipment went flying across the bridge. "Stabilizers offline!" Choi shouted over the alarms. "I can't control our rotation!" Captain Lee forced her voice to remain calm. "Auxiliary power to the stabilizers. Han, help Yun, he's injured." The Major snapped out of his fear-induced trance and moved to the communications officer, who was slumped against a wall, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. 3 days, Dr. Kim said suddenly, checking his personal chronometer. "We've been in here for 3 days, and we've made almost no progress toward the other side. Half their allotted time gone in what felt like hours." Lee felt a weight settle in her stomach. "We keep going," she said firmly. "We knew this wouldn't be easy." Major Han looked up from where he was attending to Yoon. "Captain, with all due respect, this is suicide. Nothing can survive in here. We need to turn back while we still can." Lee met his gaze. "And condemn humanity to a century of confinement? No, we press on." "The captain's right," Dr. Kim said, surprising everyone. "There's something here, something important. I can feel it." Before anyone could respond, the ship shuddered again, more violently than ever before. The main power failed completely, plunging them into darkness before the emergency systems kicked in. "Direct hit to the engine section," Choi reported, her voice shaking. "We're running on backup power now. One more hit like that and we're dead in space." In the dim red emergency lighting, Captain Lee looked at her crew. Han's barely controlled fear. Choi's trembling hands, Yoon's unconscious form, and Dr. Kim's intense concentration. Half their time gone, their ship crippled, and the void seemingly determined to drive them mad before destroying them completely. Outside the viewports, the darkness swirled and shifted, almost mocking them. On the Concorde observation vessel, safely outside the void, Admiral Zhou was probably already celebrating. "His victory. Status report," Lee said quietly. "I want to know exactly what we have left to work with." They weren't done yet, not by a long shot. Dr. Kim lay on the makeshift medical bed, his breathing shallow but steady. The explosion that had ripped through, the science lab had thrown him against a bulkhead, leaving 3 broken ribs and a nasty gash across his scalp. Captain Lee stood beside him, her uniform stained with his blood from carrying him to the medical bay. "How bad is it?" she asked the ship's medical system, which was thankfully still functioning on backup power. "Stable but serious," the automated voice replied. "Recommend minimal movement for 48 hours. Kim's eyes fluttered open. "We don't have 48 hours, he mumbled, trying to sit up before wincing in pain. "Easy, Doctor," Lee said, gently pushing him back down. "The ship's a mess. Major Han is trying to restore main power, but the engine took a direct hit from whatever's out there." Kim shook his head weakly. "Not whatever. Whoever." Lee frowned. "What do you mean?" "I had a breakthrough right before the explosion," Kim said, his words coming in short bursts between painful breaths. "The void. It's artificial. Completely artificial, not a natural phenomenon at all." "We suspected that already," Lee reminded him. "No, you don't understand," Kim insisted, grabbing her wrist with surprising strength. "It's not just artificial, it's a test, a deliberate test created by someone." The captain's communicator beeped before she could respond. "Lee here." "Captain, you need to come to the bridge." Choi's voice sounded strained. "Yoon is... well, you should see this." "On my way," Lee replied. She looked back at Kim. "We'll finish this conversation later. Don't try to move." Kim nodded reluctantly. "Check my tablet. The data's all there." The bridge was barely recognizable. Half the consoles were dark, exposed wiring hung from the ceiling, and the air smelled of burned plastic and ozone. Yoon sat at his communications station, his head bandaged, his eyes unfocused. He was mumbling to himself, seemingly unaware of his surroundings. "What's happening to him?" Lee asked as she entered. Major Han looked up from where he was attempting to repair a damaged circuit. "He started having seizures about an hour ago. When they stopped, he began talking." "Talking to whom?" "Not to whom," Choi said quietly from her station. "To what? Listen." They fell silent, and Lee could now make out Yoon's words. "No boundaries. Test the worthy. Find the path within." "It's been like this for 20 minutes, Choi explained. "Random phrases, but they make a strange kind of sense if you listen long enough." "He's communicating with the void," Han said, his voice tight with tension. "Or whatever lives in it." Lee moved closer to Yoon, studying his vacant expression. "Yoon, can you hear me?" The communications specialist turned slowly toward her voice, but his eyes didn't focus on her face. "Captain," he said, his voice oddly flat. "They've been waiting so long, so many tried, all turned back." A chill ran down Lee's spine. "Who's been waiting, Yoon?" "The builders, the ones who came before the Concorde, before everything." Han and Choi exchanged worried glances. He's delirious, Han suggested. The head injury? No, Lee interrupted, remembering Kim's words. Dr. Kim said the void is artificial, a test created by someone. What if he's right? What if Yoon is somehow connecting with whatever created this place? She leaned closer to Yoon. Ask them why. Why create this test? Yoon's head tilted unnaturally. To find the worthy. Those who don't give up. The ship lurched suddenly, throwing Lee off balance. The remaining operational consoles flashed warnings. Another attack? She asked, grabbing a handhold to steady herself. Choi checked her readings. No, it's different this time. It's like the void is shifting around us. Yoon spoke again, louder now. No species ever persisted long enough. All surrendered, all retreated. Even the Concord races, especially them. That's why Admiral Zhou was so confident we'd fail, Han realized. They've all tried and given up. Lee's communicator beeped again. Captain? Kim's voice stronger now. Have you checked my tablet? Not yet, Doctor. We've got a situation up here with... Yoon is communicating with it, isn't he? Kim interrupted. The void entity? Lee stared at the communicator in surprise. How did you know? It's all in my data. The energy patterns, the hallucinations, they're not attacks. They're a form of communication, primitive but effective. The void is trying to talk to us, but it doesn't know how. Lee looked back at Yoon, who continued to mumble phrases. So what do we do? Enhance it, Kim said simply. Yoon's translator implant. It must be acting as a receiver. If we boost the signal, maybe we can establish proper communication. And how exactly do we do that? Han asked skeptically. Kim's voice grew excited despite his injuries. We need to reroute power from non-essential systems to Yoon's station, amplify the signal his implant is receiving. Lee considered this for a moment. What counts as non-essential? At this point, there was a pause before Kim answered. Life support. The silence on the bridge was deafening. You want us to shut down life support? Han finally said. That's suicide. Not completely shut down, Kim clarified. Just reduce it. We have enough emergency oxygen for about 6 hours at minimal activity levels. If we can't solve this by then, well, we were dead anyway. Lee looked around at what remained of her crew. Choi was exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. Han's face was set in grim determination. Yoon continued his one-sided conversation. With the void. And somewhere in the medical bay, Kim was proposing they bet their last hours of air on a theory. Do we have any other options? Lee asked quietly. Han and Choi exchanged glances. So he could try to turn back, Han suggested without much conviction. Use the last of our engine power to retrace our path. And admit defeat? Lee shook her head. Condemn humanity to a century of confinement? At least we'd be alive, Han countered. Would we? Choi spoke up suddenly. Look at what this place has already done to us. Who's to say it would even let us leave now that we've come this far? Lee made her decision. Redirect power from life support to Yoon's communication systems. Let's hear what the void has to say. Han hesitated, then nodded. Yes, Captain. As the Major worked on rerouting the power, Lee moved to Yoon's side. Hang in there, she said softly. We're going to help you make this connection stronger. Yoon turned his vacant eyes toward her. They've been waiting for someone who wouldn't quit, he whispered. For so long. Power redirected, Han announced. Yoon's station is getting maximum energy. Life support is down to 20%. Temperature will start dropping soon to conserve oxygen. Almost immediately, Yoon's body went rigid. His eyes rolled back, and for a terrifying moment Lee thought they'd killed him. Then he relaxed, and when he spoke again his voice was different, deeper, more resonant, as if multiple voices were speaking through him. You have come farther than any before you, the voice said. Why do you not turn back? Lee stepped forward. Because we can't, because humans don't give up. Others have said the same. All eventually surrendered to fear. We're afraid, Lee admitted, but we keep going anyway. That's what humans do. There was a pause, as if the entity was considering her words. You seek passage through the void? Yes. For what purpose? Lee thought about Earth, about Ambassador Park and the future of her species among the stars. To prove we belong out here, to show we have the right to explore the universe alongside everyone else. The voice through Yoon seemed to soften slightly. You are different from the others. They sought only to prove their superiority. You seek an belonging. We seek our place in the cosmos, Lee confirmed. Whatever that may be. The bridge lights flickered, and the temperature noticeably dropped. Their breath began to fog in the air. 4 hours of oxygen remaining, Han reported quietly. The voice spoke again through Yoon. There is a way through the void, a path few can see, and fewer still have the courage to follow. Lee leaned forward eagerly. Show us. It will require the last of your ship's power. You may not survive even if you find the path. Lee looked around at her crew, their determination matching her own, despite everything they'd endured. They nodded their agreement. We'll take that chance, she told the entity. We haven't come this far to turn back now. The bridge of the Endurance had become a frozen tomb. Ice crystals formed on every surface as the temperature continued to plummet. The crew's breath came in visible puffs that hung in the air before dissipating. They had gathered close together for warmth, all except Yoon, who sat motionless at E. His station, still connected to the void entity. Oxygen levels at 18%, Han reported, his voice strained from the cold. Core temperature dropping, engine power almost completely diverted. Captain Lee nodded, her lips slightly blue. Status on the path? Choi checked the navigation display, which flickered weakly. It's informing. I can see something like a tunnel through the darkness. The entity is creating it for us. Through Yoon, the entity spoke again. The path requires more, not just power, will, determination, the final test. Dr. Kim had insisted on being brought to the bridge despite his injuries. He sat propped against a console, his face pale with pain. Of course, he whispered, understanding dawning in his eyes. That's the whole point. Lee turned to him. What do you mean? The test isn't about technology or strength or even intelligence, Kim explained, each word a visible puff in the freezing air. It's about determination, the willingness to risk everything rather than turn back. The ship shuddered more violently than ever before, warning alarms that no one had the energy to. Silence wailed across the bridge. Hull integrity failing, Han announced grimly. We've got minutes, not hours. Lee struggled to think through the cold and increasing oxygen deprivation. The repository, she said suddenly. Yoon mentioned something about the builders leaving. Behind knowledge. Through Yoon, the entity responded, for those worthy, those who refuse to surrender. Then we refuse, Lee declared, forcing herself to stand straight despite her exhaustion. We will not turn back. We will not give up. Not now. Not ever. Even if it means your deaths? The entity asked. Even then, Lee confirmed and saw her, crew nodding in agreement. Humanity doesn't measure success by survival alone, but by what we're willing to risk for what matters. For a long moment, nothing happened. The ship continued to tremble, systems failing one by one. The oxygen levels dropped further. Lee felt lightheaded, but remained standing, refusing to show weakness. Then, suddenly, Yoon gasped and slumped forward, in his chair. The bridge lights flared brilliantly before settling into a steady glow. The temperature began to rise, and the ship's shaking subsided. What's happening? Han asked, looking around in confusion. Choi checked her readings. Power is being restored, life support coming back online, but it's not coming from our systems. Yoon lifted his head, his eyes clear for the first time in days. They're helping us, he said, his own voice returned. We passed the test. The view screen flickered to life, showing not the swirling darkness of the void, but a clear path forward, a tunnel of stable space cutting through the chaos. And at its end, a pulsing light. All systems restored, Han reported with disbelief, including engines. Take us through, Choi, Lee ordered, hardly daring to hope. Maximum speed. The Endurance surged forward along the path, moving faster and more smoothly than seemed possible given its damaged state. The light at the end grew larger, brighter. Captain, Kim called weakly from his position. "Look." On his tablet. Energy. Readings were spiking off the charts. "Whatever's at the end of this tunnel, it's putting out more power than anything I've ever seen." The ship burst through the light into a vast spherical space within the void, a bubble of normal space containing what looked like an enormous space station. Ancient beyond imagining, it hung suspended in the center of the sphere, its architecture unlike anything human eyes had ever seen. "My God," breathed Han, "what is it?" "The repository," Yoon answered, his eyes wide with wonder. "Knowledge collected across eons, left behind by those who came before the Concorde." Lee stared at the structure, overwhelmed by its implications. "Can we dock with it?" Choi nodded. "It's actually guiding us in. Look." A beam of light had extended from the station to the Endurance, gently pulling them toward a docking port that reconfigured itself to match their ship's specifications. "They're adapting to us," Kim observed, his scientific curiosity overcoming his pain. "Incredible." As the ship settled into the dock with a gentle thud, the entity spoke once more through the ship's communication system, no longer needing Yoon as a conduit. "You have proven yourselves worthy. The knowledge is yours to claim. Use it wisely." The main docking hatch slid open automatically, revealing a corridor that led deep into the station. Lights activated sequentially along its length, guiding them forward. "What now, Captain?" Han asked. Lee straightened her uniform as best she could. "Now we do what humans have always done. We explore." Hours later, the Endurance emerged from the void, its hull gleaming with a subtle energy field that hadn't been there before. The Concorde observation vessel, which had been maintaining position at a safe distance, immediately detected their presence. Admiral Zhou stared at the view screen in disbelief. "Impossible," he hissed, his scales darkening with anger. "No ship has ever returned from the void." Council member Jin moved to his side, his expression inscrutable. "Yet there they are, Admiral. And look, their ship appears improved." Indeed, the Endurance now pulsed with energy readings that confounded the Concorde's sensors. When communications were established, Captain Lee's face appeared on their screen, tired but triumphant. "Admiral," she greeted him evenly, "I believe we've completed your challenge with 2 days to spare." Tay's scales rippled with barely controlled rage. "What happened in there? What did you find?" Lee smiled slightly. "I think that's something we should discuss with the full Concorde Council, don't you? We have quite the report to deliver." 3 days later, the emergency session of the Galactic Concorde buzzed with tension. Representatives from all 27 member species had assembled to hear the humans' testimony. Ambassador Park stood proudly alongside Captain Lee and her crew, who had been hailed as heroes upon their return to Earth. Admiral Zhou sat rigid in his seat, his scales a mottled pattern of anger and frustration. The challenge that was meant to humble humanity had instead elevated them. As Lee finished recounting their journey through the void and the discovery of the ancient repository, murmurs rippled through the chamber. "You expect us to believe," Zhou said coldly, "that your primitive species succeeded where the oldest and wisest races in the galaxy failed, that you found some mythical repository of knowledge?" "They did," came a voice from the back of the chamber. The ancient archivalist named Elder Song stepped forward, his frail body supported by a hovering chair. As the oldest living member of the Concorde, he rarely attended sessions, and his presence immediately silenced the room. "Elder Song," the moderator acknowledged with deep respect, "you honor us with your presence." The ancient being moved his chair forward until he faced the human delegation directly. "I have lived long enough to see what I feared I never would, the return of the worthy." He turned to address the council. "When the Concorde was young, we discovered ancient texts speaking of those who came before, the builders who had seeded the galaxy with life and knowledge. They left tests throughout the cosmos for those who might follow. The void of Thanatos was the greatest of these." Elder Song's gaze returned to the humans. The texts spoke of a first universal law that the builders had observed across all species they encountered, a law so fundamental that they encoded it into the very fabric of their tests. "And what law was that?" Ambassador Park asked quietly. "Never challenge humans. They never quit," Elder Song recited. Though, of course, it wasn't about humans specifically, as your species hadn't yet evolved when the law was written. It was about any species that embodied that particular trait, the absolute refusal to surrender in the face of impossible odds. He smiled gently. The builders believed that only such a species could be trusted with their legacy. Only those who valued discovery and progress above their own survival would use such knowledge wisely. Admiral Zhou rose from his seat. "This is absurd. Some ancient superstition cannot dictate—" "It is no superstition," Elder Song interrupted, his voice suddenly powerful despite his frail appearance. "The humans have proven themselves worthy by the oldest measure in the galaxy. They have survived the test that all of our species have failed, and they have returned with gifts beyond our understanding." He gestured to Dr. Kim, who activated a small device. A hologram appeared in the center of the chamber. Schematics for technologies far beyond anything the Concord possessed. "A sample," Kim explained. "A gesture of goodwill from humanity to the Concord. The repository contains knowledge that could advance all our civilizations by centuries." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans, the newcomers, the primitives, now held the keys to technology that the Concord's oldest members could barely comprehend. Ambassador Park stepped forward. "We come seeking not dominance, but partnership. The repository belongs to all sentient life, not just humanity. We propose a joint research initiative, all Concord species working together to understand this legacy." Elder Song nodded approvingly. "As the builders intended, knowledge shared, not hoarded," the moderator looked around the chamber, noting the shift in attitudes from skepticism to wonder to cautious hope. "The Council will need to deliberate on this proposal, but first I believe we have an outstanding matter to resolve." He turned to Admiral Zhou. "The humans have successfully completed your challenge. According to our laws, they have earned the right to full membership in the Concord, with all attendant privileges and responsibilities." Zhou's scales had faded to a dull grey, the color of defeat. He nodded once sharply and returned to his seat without a word. As the ceremonial processes began for Earth's formal induction into the Galactic Concord, Captain Lee leaned close to Ambassador Park. "Do you think Elder Song is right?" she asked, quietly. "About the first universal law?" Park watched as the Concord representatives approached them one by one, offering congratulations and welcome. "I think," he said with a smile, "that the galaxy is about to learn what it means to have humans as partners." "And what does it mean?" Lee asked. Park's smile widened. "That the impossible is just something no one's been stubborn enough to solve yet.